Chris Carpenter won't go down in Cardinal annals as their best pitcher ever. Bob Gibson owns that title. But he may go down in history as the toughest Redbird pitcher in history. When you've had 3 surgeries on your elbow, 2 surgeries on your shoulder, another on your rib cage, and continue to pitch and win a Cy Young Award, 10 postseason victories, including 3 in World Series play, that's a graphic definition of tough. Carp was a first-round draft choice of the Toronto Blue Jays. His time with Toronto was spotty. When he was healthy enough to pitch, he was more or less a .500 pitcher. They released him when he refused to go to the minor leagues, and the Cardinals took a big chance and signed him. Turns out he could not pitch that first season because of all the surgeries, but he missed nearly 5 full seasons because of injuries in his career. But he rehabbed and pitched 9 seasons with the Cardinals, winning 95 regular season games in 197 starts and compiling an earned run average of just over 3. Chris won the Cy Young Award in 2005 and helped the Cardinals to the World Series titles in 2006 and 2011. He relied on his cutter, a neat buckling 12-6 curveball, a sinker, and a lot of guts. One game in particular stands out for many of us. October the 7th, 2011, National League Division Series. Chris Carpenter faced off against his good friend and great Philadelphia ace, Roy Halladay. Chris beat Halladay in a sensational 1-0 shutout. He allowed just 3 hits. The game clinched the series and sent the Cardinals to the NLCS to face Milwaukee. Chris won his only start in that series, then won 2 games in the World Series against the Texas Rangers. But all those injuries and surgeries and high-intensity innings took a toll on his pitching career, and then in 2013. There is another side to the Chris Carpenter story. Winning World Series games and making millions of dollars sounds like a story of happiness, but it wasn't necessarily so for Chris. The lifestyle was consuming him. And he can address this if he wishes, but a pitcher he tutored, Adam Wainwright, wound up saving the soul of this man. It started with the Bible. Chris can tell you as much as he's comfortable about that, but it turned his life around. We are so pleased and honored that Chris Carpenter returned tonight to be inducted in the St. Louis Sports Hall of Fame. Chris. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Ron. And it's good to see you. You're looking trim. Chris was always one of the Cardinal players that was running the steps at the ballpark and staying in great shape, and you're still staying in great shape.
Trying to. I promised my son that I would not become one of those overweight retired athletes. So I still try to work out, try to stay in shape, and of course it's good to be healthy. So
you have an enormous work ethic. Where'd you get that?
I don't know. I think it's just the way I was raised. My dad and my mom always pushed me, but I always had to keep up with my brother. I had an older brother that was 3 years older than me, and to play in the neighborhood with all the kids, wiffle ball, whatever we played, football, hockey, soccer, I had to keep up with the older kids. So that's what I tried to do because I wanted to be a part of it and I wanted to play, and if I didn't, I wasn't going to be able to play. So I tried to keep up with them.
Chris, I remember talking to Walt Jocketty right around the trade deadline in 2002, and he said, Mike Matheny told us about Chris Carpenter, and the Cardinals were trying to trade for Chris, and I think he came back and won something like 3 games in a row, and at the deadline, Toronto decided to keep you. Was Mike telling you about St. Louis at that time?
Mike was not, but I had heard about St. Louis. There was other veteran guys. Dan Plesac was one of them that always talked about how great it would be to play here. And I never, obviously, got the experience to until I came here in 2003. But there was other guys around the league that always talked about St. Louis and what a baseball place it was and what a great place it was to play, and how they would like to play here too. So, and I knew that Mike was here, and Pat Henkin came here. Pat and Woody Williams were 3 guys that I played with in Toronto that influenced me to come here.
One thing that became pretty clear once you started pitching in 2004, and I was covering the team a lot more then, was you are one of those people. Everybody loves winning. The people that are champions hate losing, and you despise losing.
Yeah, didn't enjoy it. I just enjoyed competing, right? I enjoyed competing, and what people don't understand is when I got drafted in the first round by Toronto, and there was so much pressure put on you as a young kid that you were going to. I actually pitched behind Roger Clemens for a year, which was real difficult, and he won the Cy Young the year that I pitched behind him. But what people don't understand is, as a young kid, you get into this league and this situation that there's so much pressure on you to perform. You don't even really know what's going on, right? And then when my shoulder surgery got taken away from me, and I lost the game that I love, I wasn't able to compete again, or at that time, and I didn't know what my future held. So what I wanted to do was go out and just compete. I forgot about everything else that went on, forgot about the money and all those other things and all the pressures, and I just wanted to compete and see what I could do. And I took every start, spring training, regular season, no matter what it was, as important as any other. So I think that helped me.
So with that desire and the innate competitiveness, it must have been really gratifying. Once you started pitching here, in '04, the team wins 105 games. Unfortunately, you have the nerve problem. In '05, you win 100 games. In '06, you win the World Series. You and especially Tony La Russa and that organization really meshed well.
Absolutely. There was a standard of player that was here. And we were all very similar. We were all very professional. We were coming to the ballpark, and the only thing that we were going to do that day was find a way to win. And if we didn't, we moved on to the next day, and we did the same routine. Everybody knew how important it was and what it meant to not just our organization, but our fans and our city, and the expectations that were held on us. So we all came and did the best we could every single day to win, and had some great professionals is what we had.
What was it like for you, Chris, to reach the top of the mountain? It's one thing to have your team in the World Series. It's one thing to win 100 games, but another thing to win the last game of the World Series.
An experience that I think about often. The only way I can describe it, and this is what I do or when I talk about it to other people, and is no matter what you do in sport, you typically leave losing, right? If you don't make it to playoffs, you lose. If you lose in the playoffs, you lose. I mean, you're always at the end of the year, you get the feeling of loss. You're still going home and watching other people play, right? And it was the weirdest feeling ever in 2006 when I got in my car and was driving home, because I felt like we still had to play the next day. It was like, we won. And it was super weird, but the feeling of that experience was really amazing, and I've tried to express that, but you can't until you do it, until you experience it, you don't know how it feels, and it's an amazing feeling.
And Ron ran through your litany of injuries. What made you keep coming back?
One, determination, and I just wanted to continue to push myself. Each injury you deal with, you're upset about it. You deal with the failure or whatever you want to call it, but you always can use it as an example and as something positive. And each injury made me a stronger person, a stronger man, mentally and physically. I challenged myself through that. But I also had the feeling of, if I had to honor my contract, I had to honor the organization that took a chance on me. I wasn't going to give up until I couldn't give. They took a chance on me, and I owed that to them to continue to work hard and try to get myself back. I could have easily sat back on my contract and said, you know what, I don't feel like doing it. I don't feel like working, but that's not the type of person I am, and I felt like I had a responsibility for the organization and the fans that supported me.
I know that every Cardinal fan in this room will agree with me that when Skip Schumacher delivered that first inning triple against Roy Halladay in Game 5 of the 2011 NLDS, we said, well, Chris Carpenter's going to the mound, we're good. We've got our run, and we're good. Is there anything about, because we all remember that game vividly, is there anything about that game that particularly stands out for you?
Yeah, there's three stories I'll tell about that game. One was the bus ride the night before. I remember sitting on the bus with Nick Punto and Gerald Laird and a couple other guys talking about it. If you just give me a couple runs, I'm telling you we're going to win. Just give me a couple runs and we'll be okay. And they all looked at me like I was crazy, but I truly believe that. And the second one was, I've told this story many times, is that Philly was loud. I mean, they were super loud. I noticed in the first inning, though, like every out, I'd get in out, and the decibels would come down. I'd get in out, the decibels would come down, and at the end of like you get the third out, and it was quiet. All right, and then I go running back out on the mound in the second, and the same thing. They're going crazy, waving their towels. I'd get in out, and the volume would go down. So I started playing a game. I was paying attention to the volume of the stands. It was a lot of fun. And then the last one was in the ninth inning. I was sitting there getting ready at the bat rack, and Mike Eldreddy, who was a coach of ours, was standing there, and I mean, he was pacing around, and he didn't know what to do with himself. He was panicking, and I just looked at him, and I patted him on the shoulder, and I was like, Aldo, that was his nickname, was Aldo. I was like, Aldo, we're okay. I was like, we got it. I was like, I promise we got it. He's like, you looked at me again, looked at me crazy. I'm like, no, we're good. Just relax, man. Just relax. We've got it. And he's like, all right, Carv, and off I went and finished the game.
That is as good as it gets, isn't it? And if you're not aware of it, as Chris and Ron mentioned it, but Chris came up with Roy Halladay, and you are the best of friends, vacationed together. So it was kind of like the old commercial Michelob Light for the winners. It's you guys going against each other.
We actually spent 7 days in the Amazon River about, I don't know, a month after that game. We went on, obviously, to win the World Series, and the first week of December, we went on a trip and spent 7 days in the Amazon, and we didn't really ever talk about the game, except for I got a hit off him, and in that game. So I had to bring that up in front of some of our friends that we were with.
And there's another story that Chris and Ron mentioned. He's comfortable telling it. It's on YouTube. If you just YouTube search Chris Carpenter, your testimony is extremely compelling, and you wouldn't think that Adam Wainwright, who's about 10 years younger than you, could have such an influence. But even when he got here, right, in 2004, 2005, his life and his presence had a dramatic impact on your life, didn't it?
It did, and I've told this story, and again, if you Google it, you can hear it. But it's just interesting how God puts people in your lives, and when Wayno came here and got traded over here from Atlanta, I was in a different place in my life, but they put him right next to me. He was a young, skinny kid that was in AAA and really didn't know where he was going, and he wasn't a big league player yet, and they said, I want you to follow him, and I want you to pay attention to how he works and what he does and soak up his knowledge. And Wayno listened in, and we talked all the time about baseball. We would golf together and talk about, he'd ask me questions about how I got to the level that I was at. And it's just an interesting thing that over whatever, that was 2004, 2005, I can't remember, that in 2016, Adam was the one that influenced me throughout that whole time to change my life and turn it over to God. He put a Bible in my locker. He never pressured me, but he was always there. Him, Matt Holliday, Lance Berkman, Mike Matheny, Woody Williams. There's guys that God put in my life to remind me. And Adam put a Bible in my locker in 2010. That is the Bible that I read out of now and study every day. And he's a influence to me in a different way than I was an influence to him, and I really appreciate that.
I work with one of Chris's former teammates, Brad Thompson, every day. You might not believe this. Brad Thompson says that he didn't talk for 2 years because he was so intimidated by Chris Carpenter.
People say that. I don't understand why. I still don't get it. But Brad's a great guy, and you're right though. Brad didn't talk a whole lot, which is probably pretty smart too at the time.
It is so great to have you back, and we see on TV we get shots of you being involved with the Cardinals and in the dugout,
yeah.
And you're now a member of the St. Louis Sports Hall of Fame, and we couldn't be more thrilled for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for everybody coming tonight too.